Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, and welcome to Fanalysis Marvel. I'm Reti4, this is Evan95,
Hello?
and this is Jensaarai1.
The truth is, I am Iron Man.
Today we're going to be covering Marvel Avengers Endgame. It's a big old event film. It's been built up to over 10
Might have
years.
heard of it.
Yeah, you might have heard of it. Yeah, it's done reasonably well in the box office. Just a small film.
Not breaking any records or anything.
Jumping straight into our opening thoughts, guys. Keeping it no spoilers for now. I mean, everyone's seen it anyway, but we'll just go for light thoughts on general impressions and such before we open in with our usual full.
Well, I mean, you could definitely say it's a big film, and it is very memorable, to say the least. But again, like you said, with 10 years of build-up, what else can you expect? This is what everything's been, building towards for so long now. What number of film is this?
Is it 22? I think it might be a bit more than that. It's around that number.
In the 20s, haven't they?
Yeah, it's around that number, and it's interesting because we've never seen anything like that. It's the first time, not only for a large-scale crossover of this scale, but for the with so many films over so long a time, it's just completely unique. We thought, Avengers Assemble back in the day, 2012 was like a big deal. This kind of just blows it out of the water in terms of how many people kind of were involved. And yeah, it was back then, but they set a new milestone, a new bar to raise, and it'll be interesting to see if we ever have this kind of thing again, because there will never be another first. This is the first time it was ever done in cinematic history, so it's very cool. By merit of that alone, even if you didn't enjoy the film, and I think most people did.
No, it's definitely an enjoyable film, even though it's a little bit confusing at times.
Yeah, I had issues with it. But it was at the base level, as with pretty much every Marvel film, at least enjoyable. It was fun. It had some great moments, some really great moments in places. And any issue I have with it is kind of just it's pretty much irrelevant to what it's supposed to be. It's ultimately a popcorn film based on superheroes that we love to see. Brought to life from the comics. So, what were your thoughts, Connor?
I do think. Oh, sorry.
My thoughts are much the same. It's super entertaining. It's got a lot of great character moments, but there are some aspects of the plot that just don't quite add up. Because,
time travel.
I felt like
travel.
I felt like Infinity War was an overall more consistent film, even though I'd say.
No, I'd agree with that. This one, the pacing was good because it didn't feel like 3 hours at all. But at the same time, I feel like the time they spent on certain things could have been tweaked a bit. With Infinity War, I felt like
management was a lot more concise.
Yeah, it managed to do a lot more.
Each character and each plot.
Yeah, it managed to do a lot more with a lot less in terms of time frame. This one's like to drag some of its moments out, which is it could do it. But it had 3 hours to work with. But I feel like the time they did spend, they could have redone or chosen to do differently and made even more out of it personally.
Which is ironic considering in the actual story, a lot more happens in this film than any Avengers film.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And with a lot more characters kind of spread out. It was interesting how many characters it managed to develop, and we'll get more into that when we talk about the characters specifically. But yeah, how many they managed to kind of develop and build upon, even those that didn't really necessarily need it in this film. Nebula being the prime example, in my opinion.
Well, they followed the same formula they did with Infinity War and having several plot lines in this main cast divvied up throughout the story and them cross-cutting back at appropriate times.
Yeah, and then splitting the characters up as well, which I didn't expect. I figured this would be much more of a unified piece, but yeah, they took that route, and I think it worked relatively well. Plot issues aside, the character work in this film was strong, and I think it really resonated with the audiences based on the based on the kind of reputation the film's already built up.
Well, that's the thing. You could be formulaic, and it's all about execution. Even if you're following what you did previously, as long as you're able to make an engaging, no one's going to complain. This guy won't.
Which certainly seems to be the way Marvel's been doing things. None of the films that they've made have been groundbreaking by and large. There are some few exceptions here and there. Winter Soldier broke a lot of people's expectations in that front, but it's just they know how to use their characters, and they know how to sell those characters with the big moments that they have, and this film is no exception. But yeah, moving out of general impressions then into kind of the basic outline of the plot. We open with a relatively heartbreaking scene, and the kind of the setup of the emotional impact of the film and why we're supposed to care. Because if you haven't seen, another good thing about the Marvel films is they help you jump on board at least to a certain extent without having seen any previous material. So this kind of, even if you haven't seen any of the other films, this will help you kind of buy the emotional impact and the trauma, as it were, of what happened in the previous with the old finger snap. But then it leads into the kind of not really twist, but something I don't think many people expected, and that Thanos is quote unquote defeated, is taken out of the picture. The Thanos we know anyway. In the first 10 minutes, they have they have the
he aimed for the head.
Yeah, basically.
This time, yes.
And it that kind of big build up, the fact that we've been waiting for that for a year. I mean 10 years, really, and it kind of ends on that melancholy beat, and then you get that 5 years later. It was an interesting take. I didn't expect them to go that route, and I'm not even now. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. What about you guys?
I found it was interesting because they went for the whole idea of how he went out not with a bang but with a whimper. But at the same time, it kind of makes the whole final confrontation at the end of the movie ring false, because they're not taking on the Thanos who actually performed the finger snap and killed everything. They're taking on a Thanos from the past who's, it's like they destroyed his past, but not him.
Yeah,
I completely agree, because they subverted the expectation, but by doing that, they destroyed the characterization of that Thanos and the personal relationship he had with the heroes. I mean, there are even sequences in the final battle where people try and confront him, and he's like, "I don't know who you are."
Yeah, and
like, he literally says that, and it's
it doesn't diminish. It doesn't really diminish the impact of the hero's journey. So I think on their side of things, struggle they're going through, because ultimately he is the same physical threat. Sans the gauntlet. But
the physical's not the issue.
Yeah, but it's the fact that it's not our Thanos. It's not the one who's been through all of this and built up all this tension with the characters. And I mean, all the previous stuff from the film before with all the different people who encountered him, Hulk, Thor, Iron Man. This guy, he's learnt about it because he's looked through all of the memories that Nebula's had, but he doesn't have that same kind of presence.
He didn't live it.
The thing is that in the last movie, Thanos himself still developed. He was still changed by his experiences, and they're not taking on the Thanos who developed and was changed by his experiences. They're taking on Mark I card-carrying villain Thanos with none of the characterization. Like, sure, the flashback elements of his past are still there, but the actual things that happened in Infinity War don't really mean anything as far as this Thanos is concerned, because this is the Thanos from 9 years ago.
I think that was my primary issue with the film overall. It was something that kind of felt off to me. But impressively enough, though, it didn't affect my overall enjoyment of the kind of climax. It was something that I had in the back of my mind thinking, this could have been a bit more emotionally resonant for me if they had kept to the original Thanos or included the time travel, but somehow had him play a part, have it not just be him literally going cut out in the first section of the film, because it did just feel, while I enjoyed that moment, it did kind of feel like it just diminished the final fight for me.
It's my attitude is that if they were going to kill Thanos off in the first 10 minutes of the film and have that whole thing, then they should have let the character stay dead and not brought him back at all in any capacity. They should have just had it be, all right, he's dead, he's gone. Yeah. Now we're dealing with the fallout.
See, I thought about that, and I would love the kind of tension and drama they get to play with after that. But then ultimately they can't do it because it wouldn't be that superhero film. It's one of those things where they have to have the big fight at the end. They have to have that. That would be the definition of anticlimactic over the 10-year period. It would have been so fascinating to see, almost like a what-if story. What if they had ultimately failed and they had to deal with that 5-year aftermath with no way of going back. But for this climax, he had to be part of the main problem. I just wish that he'd had, maybe something to do with the time stone, his whole inevitable thing. He was going to come back. He knew he was going to die at that point, and so did something about it. I don't know, but yeah.
We should probably mention. Should we mention like the impetus for the whole thing is that he used the stones to destroy the stones?
Yes,
which is actually something retcon, because in the comics they actually established that you can't do that. So they're actually,
which makes sense,
changing one of the Infinity Gauntlet's primary characteristics, which is
and it's going to be interesting to see how that affects this universe moving forward, because in this very description of this, or very explanation of this film, doing not having the stones in your timeline can cause problems. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of manifests in the future films. Maybe that'll be the impetus for the next phase. We don't really know what's coming next. But yeah, so
also Captain Marvel.
Yeah, she's obviously the lead in to bring Iron Man back at the start. It's annoying because I really like Captain Marvel, or Miss Marvel as she was, from the comics. But in the films thus far, she's kind of been a bit of a blank slate. Just kind of, I'm stupidly powerful, and that's all there really is to me. Which isn't the greatest characterization we've had from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but we'll see what they do with her in the future. She's probably going to be more of a spacefaring hero anyway, just so the problems on Earth can still have weight. But yeah, 5 years later, what did you guys think of that sequence?
Well, interesting choice. I wasn't too crazy about some of the decisions they made for where those characters ended up in those 5 years, but I do like, well, I definitely like how they showed the impact of how the society on Earth would be affected by that sort of thing. You know, when they open with Captain America and that little circle, and they're all talking about their daily lives. You know, in fact, I just sort of like how this film overall sort of treats just the concept of trauma and dealing with it and overcoming and just evolving, you know, past, you know, how everyone has their different vices and how certain vices can be positive and can also be destructive. I felt like that was
the
handled.
super sad thing is that from a certain perspective, like even though Thanos' whole idea about how the increasing amount of life in the universe would eventually consume all resources and everyone would starve out, that is total stupidity. But in a way, there was a benefit to wiping out all life in the universe in that he basically brought an end to every single war, every single conflict, because now every single group in the universe is too busy trying to put themselves back together to worry about chasing after their enemies. Well, except for like lone wolves like Hawkeye, who just turns into a vigilante because of how messed up he is. But society as a whole, in a really grim way, kind of has improved.
It comes from that kind of appreciation. You know, he's forced that thankfulness upon people for what they have. It kind of comes from that appreciation that they're forcing upon, or he's forcing upon the universe. You know, people who are left behind have to be grateful for what they have, because as far as they're concerned, this is it now. There's no way of going back. And until that way is created, there is no way of going back. You know, even the Avengers have to kind of sit there and just see what they can do and kind of hold everything together. It's that, and the film does a really good job of getting that that tense, somber mood across. You know, it spends a good deal of time in the sequence, as it should do, and we get to see where each of the characters have gone. Some, I think, were shown better than others, which we'll get to in a bit. But the time they spend here is my favorite part of the film, I think. Outside of the the heights of the climax and the kind of fun they played with that, this is the part that really helped round off so many of the characters, particularly Tony, and his character arc that's been going over the 10 years. He's finally reached this point, even though it's come at such a high cost. Finally reached this point of happiness in his life and this kind of contentment, and again, just gratitude and appreciation for what he has. And yeah, I really like the kind of the moments they played with here, just across the board, with one exception, which we'll get to. But I think a lot of people know what that is for. Or two, I guess, too. But yeah, then we move on to creating time travel, because this can't be the new status quo. This would be a weird place to go.
They did set this up sort of in Ant-Man and Wasp, where you could use the quantum realm.
Quantum realm.
Yeah, sorry. Quantum realm to, alter time. So this is something that they're working from that, which, I think we all sort of saw this coming, given what they were setting up.
Yeah, time travel was one of the big rumors for this film, and we didn't know how they were going to use it, and I certainly didn't expect it to be used this way. But yeah, it was always going to be like one of the more expected and predicted things.
So, speaking of the quantum realm and Ant-Man coming back from it, it's discussed in the film that for him only 5 hours have elapsed since the end, since the post-credit stinger of Ant-Man and Wasp, where everyone outside has turned to dust, but he's safe in the quantum realm and comes back. For him, it's only been 5 hours. For everyone else, it's been 5 years. So he comes back and he's like, "Whoa, what the hell happened?" And I gotta say, I love the moment where he went to the memorial and was frantically searching through names, praying to God that his daughter's name wasn't on there.
Yeah.
And then when he goes to his wife's old house and meets his now teenage daughter, and just that, you're so big.
Yeah, it was an emotional moment.
It's a very touching reunion.
Yeah,
that particular moment really resonated with me because, well, Ant-Man and the Wasp, it's like the relationship between Scott Lang and his daughter was it's one of the strongest parts of those two movies, and it's just kind of seeing it.
It's seeing
so
it pay off,
changed.
seeing it pay off in a horrible way. It's the fact that we've had that build up. It really sold this scene, and it was extremely well acted by itself, of course.
It was a very quiet scene, and there were just moments where they're just looking at each other, just taking it all in. I mean, brilliantly done.
The setup and kind of backdrops to each of these scenes, be it the meeting room with Captain America and the kind of the talk group, or Iron Man with his little house, or here just in the street with everything kind of overgrown and destroyed. They did a really good job of setting the focus on the characters in the moment. Keeping that the way it was shot as well, keeping the right focuses on there. It all just came together in a really powerful way for me. I didn't really dislike anything from those emotional beats. It really just worked, which is good because it needed to, because otherwise the rest of the film wouldn't have held water. Another example of those kind of moments would be the Black Widow with the kind of group meeting. How it was still kind of that reaching for that hope and reaching for that future, while everyone present clearly doesn't really believe it's going to happen. They're just kind of going through the motions and doing what they can. It was nice to see that kind of that effort continuing, but belingered and stuff.
And it makes sense that kind of she would be the one. Oh, sorry.
Sorry to just backtrack just a little bit, but just back in the introduction of the movie when it's Tony and Nebula stranded in space, I did enjoy the interactions between Tony and Nebula, especially the bit where he's teaching her to play table tennis. And it's like basically teaching her how something flying at you isn't necessarily trying to kill you. You don't need to immediately assume your guard position.
Yes, I love that moment as well. The entire thing on the ship, I think that was time really well spent. They really, and it was kind of undercut by the fact that we knew they were going to be fine, obviously, but at the same time, we didn't know how. We didn't know how, and it wasn't an issue. It didn't affect the actual emotional moments because it was so well acted.
And that moment where Nebula showed that as gruff as she is, she's not heartless and she does care. When she sees Tony sleeping on the ground and puts him in a chair and basically tucks him in.
Yeah, it's again helps build up to the development we see later. Or the food, the offer of you have the last piece of food, and nope, you take it. It was really good. Nebula, we'll get to it later when we talk about the characters, but Nebula in particular, I think, was a really strong character in this film. Which she didn't really need to be. She didn't need to be one of the focuses, but they did a good job with it. Especially because she was also a plot point.
That's another carryover from the comic too.
Yeah.
And she's turning into one of my favorite characters, and I got to say, I am quite looking forward to what they do with her in Guardians 3 because she's part of the team now.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I like what they've done with these characters. And I'm so keen to see what comes next. Now that they've got this huge open playground to play with, that's not a part of this main story they've been building to. Yeah, is it phase 4 now, or is it phase 5?
4.
Cool. I'd lost track of where they're up to. The time travel is kind of set up. We get the introduction to all these characters. We'll talk about the character moments in the building when we get to their individual sections. But the time travel kind of occurs. This is where we all have the most issue, I think. The logic and the explanation of the time travel is a bit off because it's delivered so matter-of-factly as, why does no one understand this? It's basically this. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not how it works. Or at least not as matter-of-factly as you're saying.
It's like they almost use the characters themselves not having a clear idea of how it functions as an excuse to not establish a clear mechanic for how it functions. It's like there are so many bits, like things where they go in the past and change random things that should basically create massive time travel paradoxes and destroy their reality, or if nothing else, create alternate timelines. But none of it is addressed or anything. It's like they kind of hand wave it at the end of the movie when Captain America travels back in time to put all the stones back and put Thor's hammer back. But it's like all of that stuff.
That's the bit that makes it weird,
like because you could maybe get away with the. Oh, sorry.
So that's the bit that makes no sense for me because the idea that they play with is that it creates new timelines. You shift to a different timeline when you're doing the time travel. Which is a theory that's been played with before. But then when Captain America goes back in time, the only way that what happens with him makes sense, at least in my eyes, is if he goes back, lives out his life in an alternate timeline, and then just when presumably Peggy's died and he's finished his life in that world, he then time jumps back to the future as an old man. In that moment, or Back to the Future, back to the original world as an old man in that moment, because otherwise,
it's like he should have showed up on that platform as an old man and basically explained what he did, and he basically just said, I put off my return trip, but I'm back now.
Yeah, because otherwise, that means that everything else that they did back in the past, or at least a lot of it, would have run on the same time stream, which we've already established can't be the case because they've changed so much. It's like the stuff that happened in the 2012 Avengers didn't happen in this timeline, so it's very strange.
It's
but
like
ultimately,
the big thing is that they have a scene where it's like they're trying to steal the Tesseract from the Avengers immediately after the battle with Loki in the Battle of New York, and the whole thing goes tits up, and Loki gets hold of the stone and uses it to teleport away, which it's like that should have fucked things up right there, because now the stone isn't where it's supposed to be, and Loki's still alive. And the sad thing is that, to me, retconning Loki's death in this way, it's the exact same problem as the whole thing with Thanos. The version of Loki that they're now going to be using who is active is going to be the version from Avengers with none of his character development from Dark World or Ragnarok.
If they're even going to use him, because he's a separate timeline.
I don't think we're ever.
If they bring him back at all, it's going to be baseline douchebag Loki, not the endearing Loki that we've come to know. If you were here, I might give you a hug. Catch, I'm here.
Yeah,
I don't know if we're ever going to see Loki again, honestly.
I hope not, because I feel like that character's played his course, despite the obvious fan love for him. But just he's in a separate timeline now, though, so it's all very unclear on how they want to take this moving forward, because they didn't really establish kind of the rules properly. And to be fair, again, it's not like a major issue. I don't think the film is ruined by it in any ways. It's not a film that relies on the sanctity of its plot structure. This is a film about character moments and character development and character completion for some of them that's been built up to over 10 years. So, no one comes in as expecting, a perfectly tight plot line.
Yeah. For that reason, there's a lot of stuff that I am willing to accept. Sure, Captain America's whole thing where he just lives out his life with Carter, it's like, should have fucked everything up, but who cares, because he got his last dance. Yes, Tony Stark having that heart-to-heart with his dad back in the 70s should have fucked everything up, but who cares? Tony got to actually discuss some things with his dad, and even if his dad didn't realize it, it's kind of important that Tony got to say those things.
It's just a nice bit of wrap-up, and again, for all the flaws of Marvel, because it does have many, one thing they almost always get right is they treat their characters with respect, and you feel the heart of the production. You feel that the attention and the caring has come across in everything they're trying to do. Even if they aren't necessarily hitting the mark for you personally, you can see that they're trying and that they do care. So that's the main thing for me with this. This is a passion project, and you can see that even through all its flaws.
They respected everyone.
Well, almost. They've tried.
Well, almost.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. But so the time travel sequences themselves, we kind of touched on. Anything in particular that stands out to you? I mean, we've said about the Tony and his father discussion. We've said about
there's Black Widow.
Yeah, that's the other big one. Black Widow. Again, we'll get to the moment itself for the character.
Honestly, surprising to say the least.
I
did not see it coming. I did not see that coming. Seriously.
Yeah. I did enjoy how Captain America was able to fool the Hydra agents by saying "Hail Hydra."
That was fantastic. The fact that we were all expecting a redo of the awesome elevator fight scene, and he just leans in and goes, "Hail Hydra!" And the guy's like, "Wait, what? We got Captain America? We got him? How?"
And the hilarious thing is that if you've identified a Hydra agent, that actually is a pretty good way to infiltrate their group and keep. It's like literally all you have to do is just walk up and whisper, Hydra.
Yeah, and they'll assume you're on side.
Okay.
And
also,
the humor.
I like how they.
Sorry, I can go.
I was about to say, I also like how they established that the wizards were actually doing things during the invasion.
Yeah.
They actually see the ancient one fighting. Yeah.
It was cool to see the ancient one actually. Yeah, that sequence. Matt said to me after the film, he watched the film, that she has kind of a reptilian kind of expression when she's acting as in general, but also in particular as the ancient one. She made for an interesting listener in that scene when she was kind of trying to keep track of everything that the Hulk was telling her, and she was like, "Oh, what?" Trying to keep it all. And I liked how that scene was a different kind of acquisition for the stone. It wasn't this big climactic fight. It was just a discussion and an explanation and a debate, and then a bit of a highlighting of the kind of consequences of the plot itself as well. It was really interesting to see that one.
Well, not everything has to be a battle, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't actually outthink your situations.
Which is a nice little leading back to Black Widow's situation, because I knew what was going to happen the second it was those two that were sent. I was like, oh, okay, of course. It would have to be these two, because if anyone else, pretty much any other combination of people were sent, this wouldn't have worked. But yeah, it was amusing to see the fight. I liked how, despite the fact it was kind of played for humor, it didn't undercut the tension, because they shot it really well. It was well choreographed, and you knew in the back of your head that the moment was being built up to. One of them was going over the edge. Personally, I would have preferred if it was Hawkeye, given the situation and the build-up they'd set up for him, but that was why they did it in the first place. They wanted that to be the surprise.
Right. They wanted a resolution.
Yeah, he was the damaged one. And
him, being there at the beginning with his family, that they're setting, they wanted to set up them eventually reuniting.
But it's far more impactful.
There's a thing between the two of them. He actually has a family.
Yeah,
I was about to say that. It's like, that was the funny thing. For me, it's like watching the two of them almost in a contest to see who can commit suicide first. I was like, I honestly don't know who I'm rooting for to die, because Hawkeye is the one who is more damaged, the one who wants to die more. But he's also the one who's got the biggest stake in their success. He's the one who actually has something to go back to if they succeed. What does Black Widow have to go back to?
Yeah, she's got the family that she has now, but that's it. And I really love the moment for that reason, the fact that it was well balanced in terms of payoff, because both sides... I would have preferred if it was Hawkeye, purely on the fact that I really enjoyed Black Widow as a character. She's had a lot of development over the years, and I really wanted to see kind of where that ultimately went. But at the same time, this was an excellent end to it. That self-sacrifice for the sake of her family, arguably the closest member of her family, and for the sake of his own. I thought it was really powerful, really impactful. And whoever it had gone who went over the edge, I thought it would have been a really good moment. And yeah, it just kind of worked for me. I was happy with how that went. Despite the fact it was a loss of a great character, obviously. But that's how these moments have to go sometimes. And as long as they honour the death, which is kind of up in the air at the moment, because she's supposedly got her own film, whether or not that's a prequel.
Hopefully,
it'll probably be a prequel.
I'm hoping, because that's what most of her interesting stuff is in the backstory. So I'm hoping that's the case. But with Marvel, we never know. So we'll see.
Yeah, right.
I'm pretty sure she's going to stay dead though, because they kind of set that up in this film pretty heavily.
Yeah, it's like, if you're sacrificed for the Soul Stone, you're perma-dead. There's no resurrection. There's no coming back. Your death is written into the fabric of the universe. Sorry.
And the Hulk tried, so it did even say that much. If he can't bring it back with the Infinity Gauntlet, I don't know what can. So yeah. Anything else for the time travel side of things we want to discuss?
On the what side of things?
The time travel.
The time
all the
travel.
sequences. Anything you want to mention from this period of the film? Before we get into the character stuff, obviously.
Thor's reuniting with.
Yeah, that's
Well,
I want to say that for the character. I want to say that for the character stuff.
I know. I was about to say, I feel like there's a lot we can say with that.
Yeah, we'll get to it in a second. Yeah,
to the character.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. But that was an amazing moment. That scene, loved it. That was fantastic.
No, the actress
totally from the future.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. The actress who plays Thor's mom really nails it.
Yes, that entire scene. We'll get there in a minute. Because that's all about the character kind of build up. So yeah, the end fight. The end fight.
What happened?
Yeah, was interesting in how it kind of went across, because it kind of did it in stages, which is cool.
Another time travel sequence I did enjoy was when War Machine and Nebula went to Morag to pick up the Power Stone, and the whole thing where they're just watching Quill dancing through the temple.
That was funny.
And it's like, so he's an idiot. Yes.
That was brilliant. Yeah, I love that moment. It's that amusing squeaking of the non-diegetic sound thing that is actually.
It was either him or the tree.
or where they're cutting back and forth between his perspective with the music blaring. Just immediately cuts to silence, and he's just dancing. In a puddle.
Another time travel thing that should destroy the movie is when present day Nebula kills past Nebula. Shouldn't she have just killed herself?
Yeah,
Shouldn't she
again,
be fading away because she killed her past self?
It's the ultimate timeline thing. It's how they get out of it. It's just a bit skew-if, but we'll see how they play with that in the future if they do anything with it at all.
Strange rules with this.
It makes sense thematically. Thematically, I love it. It's Nebula truly becoming her own person and severing all of her ties to Thanos by basically killing the embodiment of her fanatical devotion to Thanos, which was herself 9 years ago. But it's like time travel wise, she should be. It should have been that scene from Looper where Joseph Gordon-Levitt kills himself and then Bruce Willis fades away.
I hate that. I
know that movie sucks.
Never even.
The
never
worst
even
example of time travel. People either love or hate that. But anyway, but yeah, it's just that was great. The humor of that Quinn sequence and also that Nebula round off, it was really thematically powerful. And I love again the fact that we don't care so much about the issues with the time travel because all of the character moments that are they're using that to be built on, and the fact that they pay off as well from their own execution, it makes it all worth it.
It is disappointing we don't get a Thanos Hulk rematch. In fact, the Hulk really doesn't do much of anything.
Yeah, he's a bit absent.
Except lift up the. Yeah, which is kind of disappointing. One of your biggest heavy hitters, especially considering how much they built up the fight. But again, we'll get to that more when we get to character.
The fight itself.
But then again, Thor armed with Mjolnir and Stormbreaker was pretty
very
badass,
cool, very cool. And the setup for it was obvious. We knew what was coming the second he had both in the picture. The moment with Captain America was fantastic. The Mjolnir was brilliant to see. I don't care if anyone has a problem with it; they can go away. It was awesome. The bit that I loved the most about it, besides the swap between the two, because no, you have the smaller one. I loved that. That was hilarious. But the main one for me was the Avengers Assemble. The Avengers Assemble moment when they opened up the portals and had everyone come together, and he finally said it because we've been waiting so long. They've been teasing us with that for just 10 years straight. And with the Mjolnir catch, the moment he does that and the camera focuses on his face, perfection. That was cinematic purity. I loved it. It was just, we've been waiting for so long, and it paid off in a big way. My issue with it, not that's the moment, because that was fantastic. My issue with the end fight in itself was, to me, it was army v army, which to me isn't exactly what I wanted for. Tonally speaking, in terms of thematic impact, I wanted a team battle rather than an army battle. Mm-hmm. It kind of took away the idea of the Avengers being that team, especially considering in the lead up to it, we only had the big three fighting, Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America. They were the ones fighting him with everyone else absent. It wasn't like they had the original roster fighting him before the backup kind of came into the picture or anything like that. It was a bit. I was a bit kind of. I was torn.
I feel like
watching
if you did that, it would be too similar to the original Avengers movie, though. Did have just the team versus the army.
But even if it had some of the extras as well, it didn't have to be just the originals. But the core group or a core group of Avengers fighting him as a team before the rest of them came in, and then having all of them on board, with just Thanos' lieutenants fighting the kind of the extras, and then the armies coming out of that. I just felt like it could have been built up to and played with a bit more.
So your issue wasn't the fight itself; it was how they structured.
Yeah, it was just the fact that there were so many red shirts in the background that didn't really mean anything. We don't care about an army in an Avengers film, if you know what I mean. By and large, it wasn't a big issue. I still loved it. It was fantastic, and some of the awesome stuff they're playing with in that background is just fantastic. But I just didn't really care for the initial feel of it personally. I wanted a team rather than an army. That's my ultimate criticism on that one. But it's a very minor thing in the grand scheme.
Especially when the whole point behind the Avengers is that they're a whole bunch of super-powered individuals who are, in and of themselves, one person armies unto themselves. It's like an army is unnecessary when you have the Avengers because each of them are army killers individually.
In their own way, by and large. And the fact that we didn't get a fight versus the Gauntlet as well. That we didn't get to see at least a partial Gauntlet fight with the team. No use of the Mind Stone against them, which could have been a way they could have played them with their backstories instead of the time travel. They could have had the Mind Stone sequences, or just pure power against the big guns that they brought in. Captain Marvel didn't really do anything with her power level. All she did was fly through the cruiser.
She showed up, acted as a tactical nuke, and that was about it. In fact, that's probably the extent of her character as I see it. She's basically just a walking nuke.
Her power scaling is a bit of an issue because pretty much every problem now is just a case of, let's just wait for Captain Marvel to arrive and she'll solve it. She's too. I have no problem with her being that powerful, but if she is, then we need other characters up there with her because otherwise she's just that lone gun that needs to be waited on to solve every problem. It just seemed weird.
Which they could easily do in future films.
They tried to justify it by with that scene at the start where she's communicating with the whole team in the video conference, and she explains what's happening on Earth is happening everywhere. My hands are full. I'm not just a guardian of Earth. I'm I got to go planet to planet here.
That is how they're going to solve that problem, is have her be out there in in the galaxy for the most part. But I would have preferred if they just had her scaled back a bit, more on Thor's level, where it's actually manageable in terms of plot and threats, because it really is ridiculous that she can just, without even attacking, she just flies through the capital ship. Oh, it's paper, and then it's gone. And yeah, which brings me to the moment I have this within this. The whole sisterhood assemble moment. We're like, we're women, we can fight, we're great. Look at us. That is not how you sell that idea. You don't need to address the fact that they're female. The point is they're heroes. They are heroes first.
Is just the fact. The other problem is that them being able to assemble right there at that moment for that moment makes no sense, because it's a freaking battlefield, a full-on army versus army war, and it's already been established that the characters are basically spread out across it. So
they also have nothing to do with one another. Most of them haven't ever met.
How in the hell did the female characters just happen to be in the same area for this one, female Avengers showcase shot?
Yeah, and also,
it was just for fun. I mean, they did something similar in the previous movie, to be fair.
Yeah, I know. It was, and the intention and the motivation behind it is fine, and I'm fully behind it. But it felt so. It took me out of the film, because oh god, really, you're doing this wink to camera moment. On top of the fact that it was ultimately pointless, because, oh great, woman with spear. I'm sure you're going to really help the person who just took out a capital ship by flying through it. She does not need help right now. She can just go, badoof, badoof, and their problem solved. She doesn't need to be flying through it and have all this backup. It felt so forced to me. And yeah, it didn't really get the message Chris was trying to send across the way it's supposed to. Because the whole point is that you're not supposed to care whether you're male or female. You're just a hero. And it draws attention to the fact, oh look, they're female. It's like, when will society move on and move past this? Anyway, that's a slight side rant for later.
You okay, bro?
I hate it when they address these issues so clumsily. Anyway,
I saw this movie with my friend Kevin, and you and he would have a ball hashing that out because he agrees.
But yeah, it's ultimately not a big deal. It didn't affect the overall enjoyment. It was just that one moment that it kind of fell false. It was great to see all of these characters. All of the characters on both sides of the Avengers kind of cycle, because we had the originals and then the post ones that came out in the last few years. It was so cool to see them all at once. You got to see some nice little moves, combinations in the background. As with most Avengers fight scenes we've had, too much to see in one viewing. You have to keep going back and replaying the scenes just to kind of get caught up on everything, which I personally don't have an issue with. I know some people say having too much on screen at once is it's overload, but for me that just makes it more rewatchable.
Mm-hmm. And I like how they use the gauntlet passing between all the characters. They each get their own little moment as a way of you feel like a lot. You feel like a lot contributed to final assault.
Speaking of the passing between the characters thing, and another criticism of Captain Marvel, this is actually me quoting Kevin directly. The scene where she takes the gauntlet from Spider-Man. It's like, you basically got this teenage kid in the middle of a war zone who's just survived an artillery barrage. He's freaking shell-shocked, and she basically just shows up and says in a really snide, snarky way, "Hey kid, got something for me?" It's like, show this kid some compassion.
Yeah, the banter was the banter was a weirdly timed thing. And also, it's fun to note that, well, not fun to note, it's odd to note that Peter is now a child soldier. Yeah, those arms were stabbing people in the throat, as he just stood there. And it's like, oh god, cowering and just literally piling into a pile of corpses. It was a bit of a weird tonal thing there, but ultimately it's fine. They're aliens. They don't matter, right? They don't get the same standards. They're just Jajari. It was weird, but yeah, again, it's just a funny side note. It's a comic book film. We don't have to think about these things too much. But yeah, so the idea of the passing between the gauntlet between the characters was good, though. It got a lot of people the spotlight that they otherwise wouldn't have had, which I liked. A bit of a kind of pass the baton.
Of those characters that were killed off in the last one.
Although it felt like once Captain Marvel come into the picture, like everyone else was just moot. It's like, we don't need anyone else now. She can just fly through any problem. Yeah, it was a bit weird. And odd that they didn't do more with her as well. They kind of set up her to be a big kind of plot point.
Strange.
We were discussing it, and he said it was basically down to the lukewarm response to Captain Marvel. It was based, like he says, that they probably had 2 cuts of Endgame prepared. One with Captain Marvel heavily featured, one with her almost completely removed in case no one liked her. And because the response to the movie was so lukewarm, they figured, okay, no one likes her. We'll put out the cut with her cut out.
Possibly, I don't know. It seemed like it was a weird build up for her, and a weird time to insert her into the universe if she was going to be this small a part. But anyway, moving on into the wrap up of this whole climactic end.
Well, she fights Thanos first she tries to get it to the Scott with his little car.
This van that still survived somehow.
Yeah, that is a very resilient van.
Yeah.
I must say, like that van goes through hell in this movie. Ant van. Did you say Ant van?
Yeah, the Ant van.
Really,
clearly.
bro?
Yep. But at the end of everything is said and done, Tony is the one who gets hold of their Infinity Gauntlet, and he basically, it's like after Thanos has the gauntlet, he says, "I am inevitable," snaps his fingers, nothing happens, and Tony reveals, "Oh yeah, I totally just stole the Infinity Stones from you while I was grappling, and now they're assembled into a separate gauntlet on my armor, and I am Iron Man."
Yep, which we all knew was coming. When he said "I," it's like, "Oh, we know. What this is." You absolutely
this
are.
is the moment where them bringing in baseline Thanos really disappointed me, because if this was the Thanos who had been developed in the previous movie, like proper Thanos, like basically the moment where he realizes, "Oh, everything I did has now been undone, and now I am undone." Whereas this is a Thanos who hasn't done any of that. He's just he's just watching his armies crumbling to dust, and all he's feeling is, "Oh, I tried and I failed." It's not like, "I had my victory snatched from my grasp. Fuck you." Instead, it was just like, "Well, whatever. I guess I'm just going to sit down and crumble to dust."
It really undercut. It didn't diminish the scene as it was. It just
wasn't
diminished...
hollow. It just could have been so much.
Yeah,
more.
exactly. It didn't diminish the moment itself.
Yeah.
It just, you knew in your back of your mind this could have been better. Which is how I felt. Ultimately the climax felt full stop. It was amazing what they did with it, despite the fact they'd already undercut the drama of the villain. But it could have been more. It could have been that original Thanos. It could have been an actual victory rather than like a redo.
And the way I see it, they could have so easily had it so it was classic Thanos who brought his army back to stop them. They could have just said that he didn't destroy the Infinity Stones. He just tried to squirrel them away somewhere where no one could get at them, but they successfully got them. And maybe the idea that he rebuilt his armies after the fact, intending to basically use them as a peacekeeping force.
It doesn't matter how they did it. There are so many ways they could have done. Just had the original body they killed be a duplicate or something from the magic of the stones he had. Had it be a time travel thing. Have it be an illusion. Whatever it needed to be, they could have made it work. Just by restructuring the plot. And yeah, I feel like they could have done it a bit better than they did ultimately. Also, another thing that doesn't really matter, but it's worth noting, is that the Iron Man glove can apparently contain the power of the gauntlet. Like, what? Didn't he have to forge his gauntlet in the heart of a dwarf star?
They're kind of suggesting this idea that all you need to have the power of the power of the Infinity Gauntlet is just to gather the stones into one place and implant them into some gauntlet-like device. But
I guess that's just if you want to reuse them rather than die on the spot with one. But yeah, it was just a bit odd. And even when the glove first formed, you're supposed to be feeling the pain of it, not just when you snap. So really, Tony should have been going like when he was making that Iron Man point and just getting radiation burn from the first 2 seconds. Snap. But again, no one cares because it's a superhero film and the emotional moment was just perfection. So yeah, who cares what the logic is behind it? It's one of those moments.
Iron Man dies.
Yeah.
Which again, everyone probably saw coming at this point, given the behind the scenes stuff. But it still hits you.
Indeed, and the fact that we've had the build up again, we'll hold off for the character stuff, but just the moment itself, very effective. I felt like it was a little bit quick, because I felt like it could have been drawn out just a tad more to get just a bit more juice out from the fact that it's been such a build-up. But ultimately, the fact that they held to it, I was really appreciative.
It's like for most of that little scene where he's dying, it's like he's just kind of sitting there in a daze, staring into space, barely noticing the people around him, just kind of dying, and only says like a couple of little words like Pepper comes up, "Hey, babe." It's like, he could, if only he had some more impactful last words, but instead it was everyone else saying, "We won, it's done, You can rest now.
Yeah, it was that rest
Yeah.
weary warrior kind of thing, which I didn't think fit Tony personally. But I didn't mind that he didn't say much because I really like the realistic feel of that. The fact that it is such a tragedy that he's just taken from him. He doesn't have that time. But yeah, the things they were saying to him, I was like, he's not like the person who needs to rest. He doesn't want to rest. He wants to live. So it was the wrong kind of message to kind of wrap up on, in my opinion. But again, it didn't like undercut the actual moment itself. It just kind of was one of those things I think they could have done a little bit better. The fact that they achieved such heights, and again, this closing to this 10-year period, this ultimate moment of self-sacrifice, super powerful.
And the funeral is really well done, and I like how they put the original reactor that was engraved from the first Iron Man on there. That was brilliant.
Yeah, it was cool.
That Tony Stark has a heart.
As if we needed any more proof at this stage.
The one thing I do wish is that the little bouquet with the arc reactor floating out, I really wish that it also had a little folded up table tennis little piece on there.
Oh, that would have been good. That would have been a really good moment from Nebula. Yeah. Small sprinkles to kind of heighten it all.
Because, I think the reason why that moment at the start of the movie resonated so strongly with me is because I actually get what Nebula went through as Thanos' daughter. And this is probably one of the first, Tony was probably one of the first people that she actually had a casual interaction with, where the two of them, just chatted, shot the shit, and just, tried to have fun, as stilted and unnatural as that is for her. And it's like, in a lot of ways, Tony Stark was Nebula's first real friend.
Yeah, it was the first relationship she'd formed or had the chance to after she'd gone through the development. So it wasn't someone that she had so much baggage with from the past. It was someone who's completely fresh after she's gotten to the point where she can start forming these relationships and got the chance to with someone who has stuff in common because they're both engineers in different respects. So it was an interesting first new step for her. But yeah, so the funeral plays out. We get to see all the different characters assembled in the background and the different levels of relevance to the character going further and further back. Did anyone else see the kid and go, what? Who? I looked at him. That must be from Iron Man 3. It's the only person that could be. I don't remember recognizing him from anywhere else. But yeah, it turned out it is.
Probably.
It is the kid from Iron Man 3, which is kind of not as relevant now because he actually has a kid, Morgan. But we'll get to that in a bit.
But at the same time, it's showing that Tony, especially after the events of the first Iron Man movie, that was the point where he started making a really positive influence on the world around him and truly started making friends, people who had his back, which is the sad thing is that before the events of Iron Man 1, he had Pepper. He always had Pepper. She was always there. But the problem is that he didn't either notice or appreciate it because he was too wrapped up in himself.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
It's the move from selfish to selfless that is the ultimate impetus of his character arc throughout the entire series, and I love how they've kind of built up to it in the final moment. But yeah, let's move into character stuff now because we've talked about Captain America, which is the only real end of the wrap up.
Yeah.
Already. So yeah, we'll move on to that now. Leading in with Iron Man, who is the ultimate kind of main character, I guess, of the MCU. He's the one that's been that kind of core thread. His film was the one that started it all. His was the longest spanning, kind of biggest weaving, I guess, of all of the characters, with a few close comparisons. Thor and Captain America in particular, but he is really the thing that ties everything together for me. Robert Downey as well. The fact that he played him just so to perfection throughout the films. He sold this. He sold this event.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it just comes down to Robert Downey Jr.'s personal history because his whole brushes with addiction and the
his
downsides of fame, his struggle, and how much of that went into the character of Tony. And because it's just that whole same idea of a guy after letting rises to the top, can't handle the pressure, everything goes to hell, and then trying to pick up the pieces afterwards, and not only picking up the pieces but forging himself into something greater than he was to begin with.
Which is truly what Tony has done. He reforged his legacy and was this kind of great uniter for the rest of the Avengers and the rest of the characters in the MCU. He is the linchpin of it all. And I love in particular in this film the resolution you get even from the very start, like just immediately following up. First of all, his first emotional moment at the very start of the film was fantastic. His kind of despair was absolutely beautiful to watch and heartbreaking because of how he's reacting to the team, and even just them denouncing the name of Avengers. This is where we're good, right? This is when we win. The kind of jump from that to the 5 years later where he's finally found contentment. He's finally found resolution to his story and moved on and found something better. He's got his child with Morgan, in Morgan with Pepper, and has everything set up for him. He's got everything to lose. He's the one person in the team, more than any other probably, who doesn't want to just discard the last 5 years. The changes they've gone through. Mm-hmm. And that kind of bigs up the setup for the plot line of not being able to just undo it all. He has to merge the two, and that's his big driving point here. I cannot lose what I've gained.
Which ironically creates kind of an interesting dynamic with Hawkeye, even though they never explore this. Just the fact that he's sort of trying to reach back into the past to gain something back, whereas he's trying to preserve something that he gained after the tragedy. Would have been interesting if the two had more interaction in the film about that. I feel.
Yeah, see, that's where I think.
I feel like there was some potential there that you could have gone somewhere with that.
Yeah, that's what I mean when I said I think some of the time was misused in this film. It wasn't so much that it was bad how it was. It's just they didn't quite squeeze all the juice out of the different character interactions they had, the different character combinations. But at the same time, if they'd done it the way I would have done it, they'd been spending pretty much the entire film just having different characters come together for different scenes, and it wouldn't work. You'd need to kind of find a way of focusing
you'd have an entire film when they were in that circle with Captain America, but with superheroes.
Yeah, it needed to be. I think more than they did, but they couldn't do it with everyone because there was so much to play off with each person. Different past relationships, finding resolution, people coming to terms with stuff that's happened just in the past 5 years, showing new stuff that we haven't seen yet from that time jump. It would have been a bit much, but I just think they could have done a bit more than they did personally because we didn't need as much time spending on the time travel shenanigans as we got, especially some of the humorous sides of it, in my opinion. But yeah, anything else you want to say about Iron Man? I loved his daughter was one thing. That was adorable.
Yeah, Morgan was cool.
Yeah, they do the parent-daughter scenes really well in the MCU to tug on the heartstrings.
I think this is a good time to mention Pepper in the power armor because I know that Pepper in the comics it actually does become a named superhero, and the sad thing is that I know her shtick. Her whole shtick is that she's not about fighting supervillains. She's actually all about search and rescue, like, super-powered paramedic who intervenes in natural disasters and stuff like that. And for the life of me, I can't remember what her superhero name is. Don't look at me. I'm an embarrassment.
I've never actually looked into it, that side of things. Is she not just Iron Woman? I know there's an Iron Heart, but that's Riri Williams, isn't it? Is it Riri Williams? Am I making that up? Am I getting confused with Rory Williams? Because that's a different character entirely, but never mind, anyway.
Still, I was glad to see her in the armor because it's like ever since they teased it in Iron Man 3, I was like, hey, wait a second. Why didn't Tony build her a set of armor? Because it actually just makes sense because she is still the head of Stark Industries, Shit still happens to people in that kind of position. Like the first Iron Man movie itself is proof of that. So the idea of him giving her own armor set in case something happens so she can protect herself.
I like seeing her in there. I think it's about time, personally. How many films have we had where it's like, just build her an Iron Woman suit? Seriously, why does not every Avenger have one? Give them to all of them. Give them all armor. But it's one of those things where it's just comic books. It doesn't make sense to not have them, but who cares? Because superheroes. It doesn't. Even back in Age of Ultron, they addressed the fact that none of this makes any sense. I'm fighting an army of robots and I've got a bow and arrow.
It's like why the heck doesn't Black Panther compare notes with Tony and make a vibranium Iron Man suit for Black Panther?
Yeah, but it's just
would be badass.
It would be awesome, but yeah, you can't take it that route. Everything starts falling apart if you start questioning that side.
I mean, you got the Iron Spider for Peter now.
Actually, think about things falling apart when you mention them. That was one thing I liked about, or found curious about the world building side in the background. Half the population is now 5 years older than the other half, and also presumably has moved on. A lot of them, husbands and wives have been separated, siblings are going to have lost touch. There's a lot of stuff. More children have been born into families that didn't know they existed previously. That is a lot of tension and drama to deal with. It'll be interesting to see how they deal with that.
It's
I was
because it's
confused, like when
what
Peter goes back to school and
Yeah,
he meets up
yeah.
with his friend. Like, wouldn't his friend have graduated?
Yeah, it was like, what's happening here?
I
Unless
guess
he was
the
also
idea
dead.
is that I guess yeah, but still, it's like
did
you're
Ned
saying, it's like
did
let's
Ned get
like
erased?
yeah, a possible like here's an example of this. Let's say I'm in the MCU. I'm a married man. My wife gets killed in the finger snap. 5 years on, I've moved on. What happens if I meet someone else and remarry and suddenly she's back?
Yeah, that's a whole lot of stuff to deal with for people to come back. For them, it's been like 5 seconds, and everyone else has been 5 years. It's
Yeah.
I mean, even you said there, your school stuff, the administration behind all of this. Can you imagine how many people would have moved on 5 years and lost all of their peers, and then the others come back and have to re-enter the school system with all? It would have been chaos. It would be really interesting to see how they handle that.
I kind of hope they address that.
Yeah,
Spider-Man.
I kind of don't want it to be a hand wave. I want them to kind of build some dramatic moments and tension from this, because that really could play off and have lasting consequences.
It's like, what if Peter Parker was, high school friends with this settings version of Mary Jane? She survives. He didn't. He's 5 years younger. She's graduated and is now an adult. It's like, how do you continue that kind of friendship? Like, how do you, it's like, we get a light version of this at the start of the movie with Ant-Man coming home and meeting his now teenage daughter. It's like that particular moment, it's, everyone with varying degrees of severity has to deal with that.
And that problem isn't going away. That's not something they can just say, oh yeah, then have to ignore it. That's going to have to prevail across the entire MCU for at least the next few films if they want to do it justice.
And the thing is that this problem is now universal to every single planet in the setting. It's not just Earth that's dealing with this, it's everyone.
And think about how many societies and how they work that would have been destroyed by that nature,
And
crazy.
here's the other thing. It's like, it's stated that when the people came back into existence, they were all exactly where they were when they originally died. Well, what happens if you died on top of a building that's no longer there and you just materialized?
Oh my god!
We don't need to think that much into it. Let's just assume that the genius with behind the glove is thinking about that and factoring it in.
Hopefully,
that's my way.
Like all the people who are
it is Professor Hulk who did it. So
yeah, absolutely.
all the people who are in airplanes.
But anyway, just fun stuff to contemplate. It ultimately doesn't matter that side.
So Captain America.
Yeah, he's the next one on the list. Captain America. I mean, ultimate resolution is that he's Captain America for most of this film, as you would expect him to be. But he finally gets a resolution with Peggy Carter.
He gets his last dance.
Yep, he gets his last dance, and he proves himself truly worthy along the road to do it. He's faced up to Thanos. He's gone through this. Throughout all of this, he's still that linchpin of a character that managed to hold on and stay true to himself. Like Tony even comments, and I've missed that optimistic naivete. Yeah. It's not too much to talk about in terms of development because he is just Captain America, to the extreme. He doesn't need to develop. He's that character that the world changes around him because of what he represents. But we still do get some really good moments, in terms of him being tempered by his experiences. And yeah, that whole Mjolnir thing is just fantastic.
I wonder what the impetus was that made him go from being like partially worthy to being fully worthy.
The way I always see it is that the reason the way I always see it is because the way the Nordic gods would be considered worthy, or the way what the Norse gods would consider worthy of a person. The thing I don't think gels with Captain America all the time is the fact that he's not really a warrior. Captain America is a hero rather than a warrior. So in that moment when he's in that kind of tense ultimate last stand, you have to fight, or that's the end moment, is when he's truly all of his other aspects kind of shine, as well as the fact that he's now a soldier again in that battle, because he is a soldier, but ultimately that's not really his mindset, if you know what I mean. He's not willing to just jump into the middle of a battlefield and just take people out the same way Thor is.
This is actually something I was discussing with some of my coworkers, and they were basically telling me that the reason why Captain America has only ever been partially worthy of Thor's hammer, but not fully worthy, is that while he does have the absolute moral purity and the honor, he's always had a little bit of insecurity in his own place in the universe, because he doesn't know how much of what he's accomplished is actually on him and how much is just the Iron Man serum. The super soldier serum. It's like, am I actually worthy of this, or is it just because I got that chemical injected into me and that's the only reason? And it's like
people have also said about that Bucky thing as well, the fact that he was keeping that secret from Tony. That was something that was kind of holding him back in that. There are a lot of theories about how his character has been slightly shaped and chipped away and changed over the years. But I personally always go with the Warrior thing because to me that just makes the most sense for his character.
And he has wielded Mjolnir more than once.
And Thor's wielded Mjolnir with similar insecurities, so it just depends on your perspective, I guess. I like the fact that you can draw your own conclusions with it. It doesn't outright explain, now because you've done this, you are now worthy, kind of thing. You just leave it to the imagination. Mm-hmm. The wand chooses the wizard kind of situation, but with Mjolnir.
It's curious.
Well, I think it also depends on what's the situation where those insecurities come up and to how deep do those insecurities go. Like, are you just dealing with surface insecurities, in which case the hammer probably wouldn't care? Or is it like a deep-seated questioning of your own worth? You're not worthy because you don't believe you're worthy.
It's hilarious how much of a nerd discussion Mjolnir can just spark in any different way you look at it. But yeah, talking about Mjolnir, moving on to Thor, who I'm not sure.
Let me get my helmet.
I'm not sure why they chose this film of all films to bring these problems with Thor into it. I feel like this climactic end, like big battle sequence and big 10-year finisher didn't need Thor turning into
the Big Lebowski.
The Big Lebowski.
Basically,
in fact, he's actually called "Move It or Lose It" Lebowski.
in the end of it,
supposedly this came from Chris Hemsworth, who wanted the character to be more like the Ragnarok interpretation. But I feel like they went way too far in the other direction.
It's like, I can understand the logic behind what they were going for, especially after the events of Thor Ragnarok and Infinity War, because the thing is, he's just watched his homeworld destroyed by his psychotic sister and the evil fire god Surtur. He thought he saved his people. Instead, the refugees get massacred by Thanos, because fuck you, Thanos.
They get halved and then halved again, even.
And then halved again when Thanos snaps his fingers. And by the end of it all, it's just like, when everything he's attempted has failed, him trying to do the right thing has just gone up in flames because of, basically circumstances way beyond his control. And, it's like the whole thing where it's like, they're driving into New Asgard, and it's basically just a tiny fishing village, and just the sad realization that this is all that's left of the Asgardians. Most of those refugees didn't survive, not because of anything Hela did, but because of fucking Thanos.
Which, again, I get what they were going for, but honestly, this should have been a time for him to step up, not go retreat into himself.
Yeah, that was the thing for me. The two parts of this were, I would have loved him to be broken here, but that would have been brooding and dark, not humorous, the tone was off for me.
What they should have gone was the sort of broken in the same way that Hawkeye was broken, where he was dead inside, but just continuing to soldier on almost like a zombie. Like, not doing the right thing because he's motivated, but because it's all he knows how to do, and he's just hoping that if he does it for long enough, it'll become natural again.
Yeah, I would have had it be brooding and depressed rather than what he was.
Consider how in the other Thor films they establish how one of his big insecurities for being king was the fact that he felt more at home on the battlefield than he did on the throne.
And he's kind of grown through that. That's the sort of thing that he's supposedly dealt with. He finally took the quote-unquote throne in Ragnarok, and then, the last film, everything that happened with the Asgardians, it wasn't even touched upon. We didn't know where they were. And then here, because the impression the last film gave me was that Thanos had killed them all. He just killed all of them on the ship and then left, and that was Thor was the only one left. But yeah, then this film didn't, kind of completely change that. So it was a bit weird on that front.
It was established and it was half.
Yeah, and it's just it was just weird because everything about we'll get to the moment with the mother in a second, because that was fantastic. I absolutely loved what they did with that. But the lead up into it was too. He didn't step up when he needed to. Even if they were going to start with him being this weird slob and not brooding and dark, just generally like mental and weird. For the sake of humor, that's fine. It was still funny. It came at the expense of the character for me. But if they're going to go that route, why didn't he step up when he had hope? Why, when hope was put in front of him and they had a chance and they really needed him to get his act together, was he still just kind of like going through the motions and just like, oh, I'm drunk, Thor, isn't this funny? It just felt really off.
Out of place.
Yeah, when and I loved it. I love the fact that Rocket got to do this. But when Rocket is the one snapping you out of a funk,
Yes.
you have gone down on the deep end. Yeah, and as much as the moment was great for him, for Thor, it was just a case of okay, we can you please snap out of it, Thor?
Though on the bright side, it is set up for one of the best character interactions in the film, which we mentioned earlier, which was Thor's interactions with his mother.
That was fantastic. That was absolutely
It's
beautiful.
just like, oh, the future hasn't been kind from you. Well, I'm not from the future. I was raised by witches, dear.
I'm totally from the future. So fun. That moment
eyes.
was so funny. That kind of humor doesn't always play with me in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but with that, I was like, yes, that's perfect. That was just brilliant because he's just choking up. It's his mother, and she's hammered the nail on the head. Yeah,
Hammer.
yeah. But it was interesting as well because I didn't particularly care about her in the previous films. This was the first time I really kind of connected with her as a character. I mean, it was just kind of that one-off cameo scene. She wasn't that big a deal
Yeah,
for me
she didn't
before
have a
now.
ton to do in the other films. That's the sad
Well,
thing.
I did really like how she was handled in The Dark World, which was probably one of the only good things that movie did, was all of those scenes where Thor's mom is interacting with both Thor and with Loki. And it's just like that moment where it's like she kind of knows that she's got her own duty, her own obligations to fulfill. She knows that, well, she clearly knows that this is the day she dies, but at the same time, she can still balance that out with what she needs to do as a mother.
And again, it comes back to that child parent scene thing again. They do that so well, even with the grown ass child. It's very much child in this moment because it's Thor and his weird funk. But yeah, just the fact that they can play with that and make it work on that newer level. It was really powerful.
And it was great when Thor stood up, extended his hand, and it's just like
sometimes it takes a while.
Sometimes it takes a minute, and then it comes back, and Thor just looks like he's on the verge of tears. Oh my God, I'm still worthy, because I'm pretty sure that at that moment he genuinely didn't know whether or not it would come.
Indeed, it was a nice wrap up, and that kind of sealed. That was the end of his development for this film, and he was back to being proper Thor with a few extra pounds after that. and then again, going back into that big battle at the end, he brought his A game. You know, he was wielding. Though I will. Both at the same time.
Yeah, it's like most of the movie, him with the big Gandalf beard was a bit much, but then when he went God mode, and now it's all
that was cool.
All tied up, yeah.
The lightning braided his beard. I love that.
I know. How does that work?
It doesn't matter. It's comic books. It was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a really cool moment, and yeah, I liked where he ultimately got, and that scene with the mother, I almost love enough to be. To get over the initial lead in, but I just feel like they went too ham on that and didn't bring enough of the brooding darkness to it.
Definitely, and what's your guys' opinion about him joining the Guardians?
Yes, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah,
the funny thing is that I think in the comics he actually did join the Guardians of the Galaxy.
I think there's a set of comics with him in it.
Yeah,
which would be interesting to see what they could do with that. To see that kind of new dynamic. But yeah, it was funny.
I kind of hope they change the tone up just a little bit for the next movie. I know it's Guardians of the Galaxy, and you can only go so far with that, but I'm kind of hoping they find more of a middle ground with him.
I agree. With him in the dynamic now, they need to change the tone at least a little bit. Bring some more drama to the next film. Because they've got a lot to deal with, because they've lost Gamora, they've got Nebula into the fray now. They've maybe got a new Gamora, depending on how they play that out. We don't really know. And then now Thor.
The problem is that the new Gamora they brought in, it's still the Gamora we had, pretty much the same Gamora that we had at the very start of Guardians 1, but it's the Gamora with none of the development from Guardians 2. It's, that's the big reason why I don't like... Yeah, that's the big problem I have with them using the time travel to retcon characters' deaths, because it's a lot of characters who are now back, but it's the Mark 1 versions of them with none of their development.
It's going to be interesting to see how they play with that, if they do anything with it at all, because there are a lot of relationships that need to be built back up again from that. It'll be interesting to see. But yeah, Black Widow we've pretty much discussed from her death moment, but I liked what they did with her in the beforehand when she was kind of holding the team together, and the moment when she cried kind of through despair was really powerful for me. They showed a bit of weakness with her, which they don't very often do because Black Widow, but then brought in the humor and the humanity when Cap showed up, and she kind of snapped herself out of it. Like, yep, nope. Still the strong character, love it, and pushing back forward. It was a really heartfelt moment, and I love that they showed those kind of layers for her.
And I do have to say, I've always really enjoyed the little character rapport that Captain America and Black Widow have always had, because, it's like he's a soldier, she's a spy, but they're both servants of the state ultimately. And it's intriguing in that they've taken opposite paths to the same destination. It's like he's always been hardcore good, but, whereas she kind of hasn't been.
Yeah, but they're able to relate because of that sense of, duty bound and like you said, serving a greater purpose, which,
Yeah. And the thing I like about it is that the two of them do have a very strong connection, but it's not in any way romantic.
Yes,
it's more
platonic.
like brother and sister. And that to me is very important. It's good to have relationships like that, where it's just the two characters connecting, but without, a specter of romantic attachment looming.
It's very rare and very rarely done well as well. But I couldn't even tell you why I like that relationship so much in terms of how it works, because it just does. The ways they played off with the humor and just the attention to caring that they have. It really comes together over the films.
And it's just the fact that the actors themselves clearly have chemistry. It's a sort of interaction where you can tell that these actors are probably friends in real life. So because of that, they're super comfortable with each other and are just willing to do stuff that they might not necessarily do with someone else.
Yeah, the acting and the casting in all of the MCU films, pretty much by and large, has been excellent. Unless someone's been maybe going too ham, Reed Heller and Ragnarok, the actors have always been bringing the absolute A game. So that really does help. And I think that's probably one of the best examples of it. Yeah. Spoke about Nebula, spoke about Gamora, Hawkeye. Not much to say other than the fact that he's damaged now. At the very start of this film,
he adopts the Ronin sort of, even though he's never really called.
Yeah, he's
clearly
dark.
Meant to be Ronin from the comics.
And I like that it's Black Widow that takes him out of it as well. Natasha kind of brings him back from the edge and gives him hope again. And I love the fact that he's like, no, don't give me hope, don't. And I'm like, yes, beautiful, wonderfully done. But that's kind of where that's where he stops. He doesn't really develop past that, because until he gets his family back, he can't do. And ultimately, at the end, that's the victory. That's the prize won at the cost of Natasha's life. His family
but they do give him a lot of agency. I like how he's the one who volunteers trip through time. Because of that, he is just that dedicated, even though he was so separate from them at the beginning. So that was a nice.
He has a lot of plot relevance.
Nice way of bringing him into the fold.
And getting him in the kind of sewers of the base, running through the tunnels with the gauntlet as well, gave him something to do, because he can't ultimately contribute to the battlefield as much as some of the more powerful Avengers. So you need to give the kind of the lesser powered characters some more immediate stuff to do at the very start to give them a proper presence really in the film. Hulk, the other big somewhat disappointment, somewhat enjoyment for me in this film. I like what they did, but they didn't show how they did it. So it's like, okay,
that was literally my biggest issue. They set up Professor Hulk, and I wanted to actually see the psychological development of that and actually see the transformation into Professor Hulk. But it's literally just time jump. We're here.
Yeah. Yeah, and not on a plot level, just a character one. I just wanted to see the tension and the build up and the payoff. There was no he's just here now. Yeah, because we've seen it over the last few years, and even the battle with Thanos. There wasn't any payoff for that. Last film, Hulk was struggling, to come out. I wanted to see how they managed to kind of resolve that, and it just never happened. There was no, it was a bit of a cut end on that one.
One image I just have in my head that I'm super sad was not in the movie was just the whole idea of when the Bruce Banner and the Hulk personas finally unify and he becomes Professor Hulk, and just the idea that the first thing he does, like in my mind, is crying and laughing at the same time, because it's both the realization of how these two separate personalities, these parts of himself, by trying to isolate themselves from one another and be separate and seize total control, have wronged one another. And the realization that they both kind of want to apologize to each other, but at the same time, it's not necessary because they're now one.
There's so much they could have played with it. Cinematically and just from pure narrative and character development, they could have really done a lot with that. And the fact I understand why they didn't do anything with it, because time, they had only so much they could spend on this film. It would have been really weird to make the film kind of top heavy and lead in with that at the very start. But at the same time, yeah, it's a shame. They should have had an extra film for this. Hulk should have had his own film to build into this, in my opinion.
That would actually be a good premise for like
Definitely.
another Hulk movie. Just have it set during that 5-year gap and show the Professor Hulk thing coming into being. Make a movie based
like a
on that.
psychological thriller. That'd be brilliant.
It would be interesting to see them play with a new kind of genre, yeah.
Like, do the Ang Lee Hulk right.
But yeah,
I like that movie.
But yeah, in terms of the actual characterization,
but
after
I
that,
acknowledge it's horrifically flawed.
Yeah. The ultimate conclusion of that, even if we didn't get to see the journey, the ending was pretty good. And apart from the fact that he didn't get to actually fight Thanos, because the Hulk was just very much sidelined in the end for the main group, which is a bit of a shame considering he was one of the originals.
It's like, it made sense within the plot line because it's like they did establish that he is one of the only beings who can handle the Infinity Gauntlet, one of the only people who can do the finger snap and not die. But at the same time, it's like, he didn't get the rematch where he could show Thanos what he was really capable of, especially as Professor Hulk. It's like, oh, you're not fighting savage, mindless Hulk. You're fighting Bruce Banner with the Hulk's body, a super genius who's probably learned how to fight properly since then.
It would have been interesting, but yeah, ultimately his only real contribution to the end is just the finger snap, which I guess supposes enough. It just, again, one of those things. It didn't ruin the film. It was one of the things I was thinking, wow, that could have been better. One of those fine-tuning.
Though I did enjoy a lot of Professor Hulk's little moments. It's like we first see him, they're eating breakfast, and it's like these massive platters of eggs. Or that bit where he walks past Ant-Man after his taco's just been blown away.
Yeah, that was hilarious. That was so wholesome, that moment. He'll have to. It's fine. This movie he's so happy. He's finally got everything sorted with his life, which is nice to see. Ant-Man was the other one, but we've talked about pretty much his biggest moment. He was more plot-centric than character focused on this one.
Yeah, he did have one of the best moments in the film, which was that reunion with teenage Cassie. But we've talked about it to death, and the problem is that's pretty much the only thing. It's like he's come back, he's picked up what pieces he can, and now he's like, okay, how do we move forward from this? Or how do we move back? Because time travel.
And
I am looking forward to a third Ant-Man, though.
Yes, as am I. They've got a lot of setup for all of the films to come, and I guess we'll move on to the the closing thoughts then. All of the things to come following this, for the Phase 4, I'm looking forward to, because this is they've kind of gone over that hurdle they've been building up to for 10 years now, and they won't ever be able to build up the same way. This is kind of the peak in terms of the scale of the collaboration they've got with these films, but it has opened the door to so many new stories, so many new character arcs they can take forward with some of the people who are still around, so many different new stories they can tell with the world building elements that have been introduced. The fact that we've now got Thanos out of the way, we can actually wait and settle down and see some of the smaller scale stuff come back to the forefront as well, without it being undercutting the main tension. They've got room to play with it now, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be difficult for them to establish another threat, another villain nearly as completely, but we'll see. Time will tell.
Indeed. There are still things they can do with it. It's just a case of how they want to take it. What I want them to do is not try and build up to another Thanos. I don't want them to next start laying the foundations of a new 10-year sequence, because while it could still be good, it would undercut what they've achieved, I think. They need to take this in a new direction.
Exactly.
Try and do something different and play with this
universe.
And
the other thing is that they should also try and take it, if they want to try something like that, maybe try giving us a different kind of villain, because Thanos, it's like he was both simultaneously a physical threat and had a very twisted personal philosophy that made him interesting as a character. But the next villain should be like more of a pure strategist.
Different type of person, different type of player on the field. Basically, everything just needs to be different. They need to do something different. Take this time to just have fun and work in this playground they built for us, because it's something that they'll not have a chance to do again, really. And I just don't want them to just ground plummet this into terrible. That would be the worst thing to happen.
Indeed.
But yeah, before we close, any last astounding moments that we haven't mentioned that you want to talk about?
I think we covered all the big ones.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. The big one for me was Avengers Assemble. That was just lovely. I've been waiting for that for years. It was fantastic. But yeah, if that's all, I guess we can wrap up. Looking forward to seeing what you guys thought of the film yourself, guys, in the comments down below. Hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. I'm Reti4, and I still don't have an outro.
Evan95, we hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys later.
Jensaarai1 signing off. Good night.
Avengers Assemble.